Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Biorix, I warmly welcome you all to today's Biorix expert session. Today's session is titled The Hidden Impact of Wildlife When Cities Heat Up Insights from Geckos. We are delighted to have Mr. Amith S J as our speaker today. Mr. Amith S J is a PhD scholar and guest faculty at CUBEC Jain deemed to be University, Bengaluru. His research focuses on understanding how urbanization and rising temperature influence wildlife, with a particular interest in geckos and their responses to changing urban environments. Through his research and academic work, he has contributed to our understanding of the hidden ecological impacts of urban heat on biodiversity and the challenges faced by wildlife in rapidly developing cities. Today, he will share valuable insights into how heat affects wildlife and what geckos can teach us about adapting into a warming world. Without further delay, I invite Amith S J to begin today's session.
Thank you so much, Dia, for the warm introduction. I hope I'm audible to just somebody can confirm that. Yeah,
Yes, sir,
thank you
you
so
are
much.
audible.
Thank you so much. I mean, I can see almost 20 plus participants. Uh, I don't know whether you guys came by looking at the title or by understanding something new, but I am absolutely excited to share some of the insights what currently I'm working on and which is absolutely required for current scenarios. We are obviously listening about the climate change a lot and how we are actually seeing how actually the world is boiling up from last few years. So probably I'll share a few of those basic insights, those who are new to the ecology and biology. And also I'll talk about, not in much detail, but I'll show you the gist of how the research work is happening and what type of research questions we are trying to ask and solve here. Okay. I'll quickly share my screen. You can let us know if that's possible. Is my screen visible to all of you guys? You all can see a ugly, beautiful looking gecko picture. Can anyone just respond? Then I'll start.
Yes, sir, we can see.
Yeah, thank you so much. Give me a second. Okay, cool. So I titled this talk as When Cities Heat Up, the Hidden Impact of the Wildlife. We know that there are a lot of wildlife present in the forest and whatever the habitat you take up. But when we talk about the urban areas or when we talk about city particularly, there are only few things which we will survive from the last year or from the past few years. So in this thing particularly, I wanted to talk about this reptile, which most of you guys will hate and most of you will see and you will get disgusted by looking at this gecko. That's what the opinion I'm getting from most of them. So, and currently I'm working on this particular two species of gecko. So I thought this is the right time to share a few insights about how these animals also is possible for, is responsible for many things. Okay. So as you can see that from few many years, this is the map from 2018. If you can see the how human city population looked like, particularly probably we'll just focus on the India. You'll see few red patches here where we have more than 10 million people in a one particular city. So from 2018, this is from last 10 years data. If we take till 2030, we'll see immense change here. We'll see a lot of urban areas are growing, a lot of mega cities are coming up, a lot of metro cities are coming up. So there's been population shift. We are constantly seeing from uh, I would say like villages to urban area, and the way urban areas are growing. So that's immensely more. And I don't know how many of you have been to Bangalore or how many of you know particularly Bangalore. So Bangalore was like this. And now if you see go like more 40 kilometers in all the areas, you will still see the Bangalore. So that's the situation of one of the current South Indian city, what it is. So the expansion is rapid and it is more. So probably in my talk, I will focus on the Bangalore since the current study is happening here. But I'll also give few of the other cities example, like how urbanization can impact. But the whole idea or the goal will be the same for this whole through this talk. So you will see that how by 2030, how human city population has been expanding in everywhere. So particularly if we look into the India, so this is one of the clearer urbanization map I've got. You'll see how rapidly the South India has been transformed, right? So we'll see most of the cities, 10 million plus population has been increased, and we'll see most of the villages has been transferred into the urban areas. We'll see this rapidly happening in southern India rather than in northern India. You'll see that there is also the city has been expanding, but we'll see most concentratedly in the southern India. So this is how the urbanization or the urban areas or the cities would look like by 2030. So considering this in the context of this talk, as I mentioned, I'll talk about the city, or what we call Bengaluru, also called as a garden of the city. The city was filled with many things before. I mean, there are still there what I'm going to tell, everything you will see, but the number of parks or lakes or whatever has been reduced rapidly from the million of the times. So Bangalore's climate was this. I don't know whether if you guys can believe it or not. It never passed 28 degrees until the last 10 years. So this is how the Bangalore was looking from the past. And we had like a lot of lakes. You name the lakes, there were a lot of plenty of lakes, not only the small lakes. A few of the lakes were more than 10 acres, 15 acres. The lakes were there. Bangalore had around almost nearly up to 1080 lakes. So this was the count if you look into the history. But currently we can see maximum of 271. In that, the good restoration, the good habitat, what we see probably around 150 lakes maximum. So this is the current situation of urbanization. So we think that obviously urbanization is a good thing, and which is absolutely important for us. But the consequences happening to the ecology is also needs to be considered, because not only humans are living here, right? There are many things which are depending on this particular habitat also, and before it becomes urbanized. So as I mentioned, we had a lot of lakes, we had a lot of hillocks, which will have very unique kind of species present all over the places. Wherever you see the rocky hillocks, you'll see different kind of species. You see a lakes, you see obviously the most of the marine birds, the fishes, everything. So every pristine area will have a pristine habitats. As I mentioned, that will always possess a specific type of diversity. That's what we used to see from the longer time. So hillocks, the parks, I mean, since we had most of the parks in Bangalore, they named it as Garden City also. And still we'll call it as a garden city, but mostly it has become Garden City to Silicon Valley of India. So that's because the parks have been reduced. If I ask any outsider, tell me few of the gardens you have visited, they would obviously say Kaban Park and the Lal Park. So these are the two major things what everybody knows. But we had many of it with a good condition, but that's not what we are currently seeing right now. I will show a very shockingly hurtful map of Bengaluru urbanization, how the green space has been reduced. So from this, where we had content, lot of biodiversity, I just tried to create one image where I could show most of the biodiversity of the Bangalore in a one picture. I mean, we can take from marine ecosystem to the avian, to the mammals, reptiles, everything. Whatever you're seeing in this slide, we had everything. I mean, we had lorries in abundance in number. I mean, this was not in any cities as per the record says. So we had lorries in many number. Imagine the amount of good pristine forest we had preserved before in this particular habitat. Now this had turned into a, obviously there are many good things happened. I would never say that urbanization is a bad thing, but yeah, we become a mega city, but obviously we reduced many of the things, we lost many of the things. So we will see city like this now. You go to the 15th or the 16th floor, you'll see only the concrete pieces, you see only the buildings, you see only the refractive materials. So there are green patches, but it's very less, and which doesn't serve all the purposes what it requires to call it as a one of the city. So this is what the present Bangalore looked like. Because of the rapid urbanization, we had a fragmented natural systems. So if the Bangalore is like that, we'll see like in 2 3 places the green spaces. So that doesn't serve all the purpose, right? So then how do we maintain the biodiversity in this place? I showed many species in one particular image. So where we need to survive, make them survive in for a lifelong also. But how do we do this if there is a lot of buildings and a lot of urban spaces? So yeah, probably we'll discuss few of the solutions also, how it would be and what it could be. But yeah, this is the case for any diversity currently present in this urban areas. So obviously, so this we would expect any greater biodiversity to look like this. But currently, most of the cities are turning like this. I mean, this image would show little extreme, but obviously, the global climate change is part of this reason for becoming any green paradox into a heat generating machines. And this looks very fancy. This is really good, everything is fine, but how do we maintain the biodiversity is the major question I came up with to understand how animals are surviving, how animals are adapting. Is there any path for them to survive? We all know that, I mean, if you get little hotter, we will enter the AC room. We have something to thermoregulate ourselves, but what about these animals? So actually, today I was teaching ecophysiology for one of the PhD mate. So this is what we were discussing throughout the class. Obviously, we are endotherms and the animals are ectotherms. This becomes a very important reason for us to understand how do we thermoregulate in particular areas? How do we survive? This was the question for all the animals. Imagine how birds are going to survive in suddenly pristine urban diversity with no green spaces. So I mean, that's how it all started. So here you can actually see that how built up area has been increased in the Bengaluru. This is the Bengaluru map would look like. We will just focus on this blue part where they show the built up area. In 1973, it all started somewhere here, and you can also see many larger lakes uh, around 50 years back. So how this city has been transformed in a 50 years, that is what something scares us when we look into these maps. So you can just see how 1973 to 1992, all the major industries or factories have come up. Then 2002, it became like this. 2008, they expanded most of the cities. In all the borders, we would see some of the industries, housing complex, and many things came up. By 2021, it would look something like this. So where, I mean, you can see there is barely a green spaces present. From 2021, again, it took another speed for to become a more urbanized area. So the recent one of the paper was published in the Nature around, I think, last year itself. I took another map from there. I have also linked that paper here. You would see by 2025, I mean, this is the exact map I was showing from 1973 till the last year data if we compare. So yeah, this is how the 2025 map would look like. We have like 6% of green space, 87% of the urban area, 87% of the urban area, which is like most in the Indian cities and most in the world cities also. And we have like just 1.86% of the water bodies are left. We all know that how water bodies are great refuges for most of the animals. I think all the biology students would agree with me. If there are these two things are not there, where will these animals would survive? Where will the small bats and small birds would survive? So currently the Bangalore is filled with like almost 87% of the urban spaces. But this is where the question would comes around. That doesn't mean that are we not seeing any birds here? Are we not seeing any animals in the city? But absolutely we are seeing. But how are they surviving it? That's where all these questions come back to it. So I just wanted to show that how rapidly the urbanization is happening here. Not only the city, I also find a few papers which talks about cities like Kochi, how the built-up area has been uh, expanding rapidly. I think this is a very good paper I found. I think somebody interested could actually look into this up. How the built-up area is extending from last few years. So this is how it is. And I also found one more paper where we could actually see the land use and the land change map. Here we could see Kochi and Thiruvananthapuram also contains a lot of built-up area, which is causing many problems. Obviously, in an economy way, this is really good. But as ecologists and a biodiversity people, we need to think about this land use and the land change map. If we do it in a right way, then yes, it is absolutely right that we would create more refuges for these animals. But if this continues and in the same way this gets extended, this is where all this problem causes. So yeah, so whenever we see this urban built up area, concentrated areas, right, this will lead to one particular effect called as urban heat island effect. I think you all might have heard this terminology, but if somebody is new to this, you can understand. This is the new terminology we always talk about. This urban heat island effect is like a dome kind of a structure which will create in the urban areas where the temperature gets trapped here. Okay, in this picture, as you can see that in this y-axis we have some temperature markings present. In this x-axis, you can actually see the rural areas. From rural areas, we are coming towards little suburban, then the peri-urban areas, and this is where we get to see the real urban area. Yeah, from both the sides, we have just marked it here. But if you see the temperature here, how gradually it varies. This everybody knows it. From 30 degrees to easily it will rise up to 34 to 35 degrees. Here we can easily see that the 3 to 4 degrees of change. We all know that how each degree of change, what does it do? So what happens is, because of all the complex structures what we have made, whether it's less vegetation, concretes, building, glass, all these are reflective materials which will trapped inside. So this is why this thing, whatever you're seeing here, so the temperature gets trapped so that the temperature increases automatically. So this causes a lot of difficulty to many of the organisms, and whether it's flora or fauna. So this particular phenomenon, we call it as a urban heat island effect. But there are many consequences in this, and that's what one of the things what we are going to look into it. So yeah, as I mentioned, these are the few reasons I've listed. Because of the limited vegetation, this will happen. Reduced ventilation, there is no ventilation for happens to happen. If you get into any of the 15-story building, you will see there is no way that air will regulate all over the building, right? So heat gets trapped there, the air gets trapped there. And obviously the major thing is heat absorbing properties are there everywhere, whether it's concrete, whether it's Teflon, whether it's the glass what we are building with. So because of all this is what happening. We are into the bubble of a temperature. So that's what we call it as a urban heat island effect. So exactly, this is the research I was talking about, the recently uh, research led by the Professor T. Ramchandra from Indian Institute of Science. This clearly showed that how urban heat island will approach the higher temperatures just because all the buildings are together, just because there is no much refuges, just because there is less vegetation, right? So this is how the impact happens from the peri-urban to the rural areas. So as I mentioned, how this will create a thermal battle for whoever present here, whether it's humans or animals or reptiles, anything. So we know that one of the best example is how we can easily reduce a 2 to 3 degree temperature is just go under a tree and stand. To do this, we need to have a trees inside the city areas. We need to have some of the refugees present, right? So that is what it is about. And this particular urban heat island effect not only causes one species of animals or one variety of animals, we could see most of the effects in the amphibians. We can see them, they're losing their breeding areas, their reproductive dispersion is happening. Insects, I can talk like 2 hours about insects, how they are affecting because of the urban heat islands. I don't know, most of you would have heard this concept called as ALAN, right? Artificial light at night. This is what this picture is saying. How this artificial light is affecting most of the insects because they're disrupting their circadian rhythm, they're disrupting everything what these insects do because of the artificial light. And this light stays constantly all over the night in the urban areas, right? So that is one of the major causes. In reptiles, this is what we'll mostly talk about in the further slides. But yeah, thermal imbalance is one thing what we understand. Small animals go through the heat stress, dehydration, bats, anything you name the animal which are present in this particular dome of the urban heat island effect, most of the animals are uh, going through some of the other problems because of this urban heat island effect. So in this, particularly, I wanted to talk about the reptiles, which is a lizard. I just compared that with the human, for example. Since we are endotherms, we will regulate the temperature by doing something, whether our internal temperature regulation, homeostasis, sweating, negative feedback, positive feedback, all those things is there for us to understand. But ectotherms are the animals which they have to depend on the surface temperature. They have to depend on the surrounding temperature to regulate their internal body temperature. So that's when the problem starts. Imagine if the surface temperature is crossing 35, 40 degrees, this animal have to adapt to that. Or else the only thing what we see is the declination of the species. Or they are, I mean, as Charles Darwin says, they if they are very fit, if they could able to survive in this particular harsh conditions, they will survive and continue their species. So that's when my study focused on a ectotherm, where we could easily understand how thermal balance is happening because of these urban heat island effects. Whether it's a reptile, or I mean, whether it's an amphibian or whether it's a bird or anything, this one mechanism what we need to understand how these animals are actually thermoregulating themselves. So yeah, we know that how mammals or humans can maintain their same body regulator temperature even though the environmental temperature fluctuates. Whether you go for a 15-degree or whether you go for a 40-degree, we will survive. But yeah, that's not the case for ectotherms, right? We need to adjust. They need to adjust to the external temperature. That's what the reptiles do. That's what the geckos also do. Since I told that most of the animals have an effect of it, but I choose for my research a reptile, particularly a lizard, because there are many reasons for it. If you're working for a project considering the urban ecology, where you need that animal to survive in that place for a longer time, then only you would easily understand their ecology and their genetic part of it to know that whether is it adapting or is it not, whatever things. I felt that reptiles are one of the good study models to understand the thermal regime of it. Whether you understand critical temperature, preferred temperature, optimal temperature, anything. So, I mean, yeah, since we have reptiles, people would ask me, why didn't you take snakes? Why didn't you take the larger lizards? So I felt that gecko is one of the best models to conduct a research to talk about or to understand about the urban heat islands. That's because there are four reasons, as you can see in the slide. One, we have lot of microhabitats which are present where these geckos and reptiles are surviving. That is one where we could easily understand how their regimes are, how their refuges are working, and everything. And second thing is obviously they are ectotherms because they have to understand to the surface temperature or the surrounding temperature. There we could easily understand which species has more capable to survive in this area, which species are not. So that is one of the reason I have chosen. And the second thing is compared to the birds, mammals, and the insects, I felt that geckos would give me a more biochemical link between the morphology and the heating. I mean, it's very difficult for me to directly say that, okay, the pigeon is evolved in a morphologically because of the heat stress than I would test with a reptile. And another reason for me to choose a geckos as an ideal model because they are abundant in cities. You see them everywhere. Most of the species are found in the cities are surviving from many decades, and they use range of substrates. You see them on the pole, you see them on the wall, you see them in your office, you see them behind the AC, you see them on a park, you see them everywhere. So that makes us more clearer to understand how these animals are adapting to the surfaces. Probably if the smoother surface is not helping them, they will go to the rougher surfaces. So that is one thing what I found out from the literature. So that's one of the reason. And they're well suited for functional analysis. If you want to perform any functional experiments, whether you want to make them run on the different surfaces, whether you want to uh, catch them and look their temperature, that is one of the good thing happen. And second thing is we can also check how the diurnal species and the nocturnal species are reacting. As I mentioned, the urban heat island effect, it doesn't only affect the mornings, it also affects the night temperature, right? Night temperature is something which is affecting more actually. So since geckos have both diurnal and nocturnal, I think I know that most of you understand what's diurnal and nocturnal, the day working gecko and the night working gecko. So this gives us well suitable model to understand how the day geckos are responding and the night geckos are responding to it. So I mean, considering these points, I felt that geckos could be the ideal model to work with, so that that's why I choose this two species of geckos. I will probably talk about it. One, the nocturnal one, and one is the diurnal one. So this is how we choose the module. So these are my geckos. For example, Hemidactylus pavimaculatus. This is the species of Hemidactylus which we will widely see in most of the cities. So basically, this is called a Sri Lankan spotted gecko, but it has been widely spreaded in the southern India right now. You see them in the forested area, you see them in the urban area, you see them in the park everywhere. And this is a nocturnal gecko. So this is one gecko what I have chosen. And the second one is the Nemaspis mysuriensis. This belongs to a species called Nemaspis. This is endemic to the particular Bengaluru plateau. I would see this somewhere around 80 to 90 kilometers in and around the Bengaluru area. So that this both felt the right species for me to choose to understand how diurnal is happening and the nocturnal gecko is looking for it. Okay. So yeah, as I mentioned, this was the nocturnal, this was the diurnal. This is how actually these geckos would look like. These are my few models which I have collected for the experiment. As I mentioned, this is called a Sri Lankan spotted gecko. You can see in this picture itself, they choose artificial substance also as their home. They also choose a natural rock also as their home. So this gives us to understand how their microhabitat uh, choosing ability and how their survival also. This is one of the gecko, the nocturnal one, and this is how the Nemaspis mysuriensis would look. This is the comparatively smaller gecko than the other one. So yeah, so this is a diurnal gecko. So these are the two model organisms I've picked for my current work, and this is what I'm. This is two geckos references you would see in my further slides. Now I hope you all understood that what the concept of urban heat island looks like, and how most of the animals are getting affected because of this. We understood that how ectothermy and endothermy plays a major role in this particular urbanization or urban heat island, right? Now, my only major objective was to take geckos and work was it, can these animals adapt to the cities? If yes, how? If no, why not? So this is the question I actually picked up in 2023 to understand. Oh, okay, let's figure it out. If yes, how these animals are actually thermoregulating? If not, how? I think if I ask, can animals adapt to the cities? I would say yes for now in the current scenario what we are living, but this doesn't applicable for most of the species. So that's where we need to understand how the evolutionary trait has been coming from any of the particular species to understand that whether these are going to survive or not. So yeah, so one of the greatest literature I found for this question to solve whether animals adapt to the cities. So there was one beautiful experiment conducted in Puerto Rico, somewhere near the USA. So what they did was they picked whatever the animal you are seeing in the slide. So this animal is called Anolis crystallensis. So this is also a lizard. This is the ectotherm. This is a larger lizard than a gecko, which belongs to a group called anoles. So these animals are also, as I mentioned, geckos. They live in cities. They also live in the forested area. So absolutely for that particular area, they felt this could be the suitable model organism. So they picked this animal to understand how urbanization is driving or how urbanization is going through the adaptation because of this. So once they test with this animal, so this is how the animal looked. We also called it as a green anole. As I mentioned, this particular research was done in a Puerto Rico, where they sampled these animals nearest city and the nearest forest, nearest city and the nearest forest, like this in a 5 places. So once the experiment's done, this is what they could found out from this urbanization experiment. They would actually see animals are having a larger toe pads. Toe pads are nothing something which would look like this in a lizard. So these are what we call it as our toe pads. We would see them that consider this as a, if you're looking at my picture, consider this as a rural animal, consider this as a urban animal. They could actually find the toe pads were larger in the urban animals which were present. So that fascinated me to understand how these are changing in the morphology. Morphology changing is something it will take time. That's what the evolution had taught us. It will take million of years sometimes. It will take at least 1,000 of years for anything to change morphologically. But we could see this in geckos that they would change their morphology in few generations itself. Okay, so that is one thing what we understood from this research, and they could also find the longer limbs. I mean, considering this as the rural one and this as the larger one, so they could find the longer limbs in the urban geckos, and also they were better adapted to the thermal temperature in the urban areas. All these three things were fine until I read this research paper. I understood. Okay, morphology is getting adapted. Yeah, there is some changes have been there. Okay, we also see longer limbs and the longer toe pads. Good. Okay, even the internal, see, we could see morphology getting adapted. We could see physiology also getting adapted. We could also see the temperature regulation, how it's happening. But when it comes to the genetic changes, this is where it blew my mind that within a span of 10 to 20 years, how does the mutation is happening? Just because of the urbanization, just because the climate is changing, just because the urban areas are expanding. This is what, I mean, I think everybody should look into this paper that they've clearly mentioned that how evolution in these animals has been so fast and so rapid. We could see clearly how these animals are adapting into these urban areas to cause a microevolution. So this is what something which new to me when I was reading this. So we could actually see microevolution in and around us. So this is one literature. I took it as a Bible for my study, and yeah, this is what I was showing you guys. One, we could see in the urban areas, we could see more lamellae in the more toe pads, and we could see the larger toe pads compared to the urban ones, and also the longer limbs. So this is how morphology evolution was there. This is what I wanted to test in the geckos which are presenting in the city. I know that there are more uh, higher temperature cities are there in India. If we look into the coastal areas, if we go to the North India, we will see the temperature goes up to the 40 degrees, 45 degrees. Uh, Evolutionary, if we take a Bangalore as an example, it never crossed the 30 degrees or 35 degrees. We could, I mean, somebody could easily comment and tell me that how would you experience a urban heat island effect in an area called as Bengaluru. So that is why I picked the animals. I picked the model system in a such a way that they've been there, they've been living in this particular area. So they have to adapt it, right? If they're surviving. That's what my whole research will talk about. I will just give you the glimpse of what's my current research and what are the questions I've been taking to solve this. So this is the major four questions what I have taken to understand whether these geckos are surviving good or bad. So one of my objective talks about purely morphology. Are these urban geckos physically different in a size, particularly in a limb length, in a urban and the rural area? So I've been picking geckos from rural and the urban areas to understand their morphology. And the second thing, what I'm trying to look is the sprint performance. You all know that sprint is something all the runners do, right? So I'm trying to understand how these animals are running in a different surfaces. This is the most exciting objective for me to work on it. I'll explain more how this is happening. And third, obviously, I'm looking their thermal biology. I'm looking their preferred temperature, how rural geckos are preferring which temperature, how urban geckos are preferring what temperature. I'm looking their critical temperature maximum, critical temperature minimum, what are their optimal temperature between the rural and the urban geckos of those species, what I showed you. And finally, I'm also looking to their stress physiology. Obviously, urban heat island is one of the stress. The higher temperature is one of the stress. Uh, Less refugee for these animals is a stress. So this, how are we quantifying it? How does this physiological stress has been there in the urban geckos? If yes, how? And if not, how? This we would easily calculate or identify using their blood samples. So this is one of the questions what I have taken and trying to understand how this whole urban heat island effect is affecting these geckos. So if I look into the morphology, so this is what I'm doing currently. This is my first sample, Hemidactylus parvimaculatus. Uh, if you are a little away from a phone or a laptop, you can just come a little closer to the slide. You can see that I am trying to understand each and every body part of the gecko and how they are measured. For example, I am taking the measurement from a tail tip to their head width, A to Z. I have came down around 33 parameters, and I've noted each of these measurements of a particular gecko, which is found in urban area and the rural area. This is the first gecko, Hemidactylus parvimaculatus. This is the nocturnal gecko. Remember in the Anolis example, I told toe pads. This is what those toe pads would look like in a gecko. And these were the lamellis. This is how they do. This is how they look in this particular species. So we try to measure everything in a morphometrically to note down how this gecko would differ from urban and the rural area. And the same thing was done with the second gecko also, which is Nemaspis mythoriensis. So the same, we have listed around 33 parameters to understand how this gecko has been different from urban area to rural area. I would just summarize my yeah. I would just summarize my result, what have been found till now. So here, if we look into the Nemaspis, the diurnal gecko, we have found that in the locomotional strategy, we have found extreme limb elongation has been found in the urban geckos. So like one of my PCA plot, which clearly shows that there's been almost a 20% of the difference in the limb moment growth in an adult sample. So that is one thing, was a good insight what we have found. And second thing was a sensory adaptation. We could see the larger eye diameter in our urban geckos compared to the rural one. And also the cranial, the head length, whatever the skull, what do we say, this was also being noticed that it is unchanged, even though there is a change in the cranial part of it. And also we could show that exposed to the spatial navigation has been more in the urban areas, urban geckos rather than the rural one. Same in the same case, if you look into the limb length of this Hemidactylus gecko, which is this one, we could see like expansion has been there like up to like 8% in it. This is what we found out. And also expanded cranial and ear to eye dimension. So this is how it would look like. Yeah. Ear to eye dimension was found. Probably that they are using for their foraging or for the prey and predator exposure. Anything would be the reason. So this is what we would found. And also the increased head height. So in my paper, this is what we have recently submitted to this journal. Here I'm actually trying to explain them that how the predators are adapting. For example, in this case, Hemidactylus, what is their prey connection? How much more they are able to attack the food. But no, it's not the same case in the rural area, because I also mentioned how artificial light is present that attract more insects. So that automatically cause or left them the more food in the urban areas. So that could be one of the reason for this expansion to happen. This is what one of the insights what we have found. And also we could see that they are well dwelling in the artificial light. There is no problem with it. There's no insecurity or there is no confusion for them to surface in any of the surfaces, particularly in this nocturnal gecko. This is one thing what we would do. As I mentioned in my second objective, which is talking about sprint performance, if you're wondering how I calculated or measured this in what all surfaces, this is how my experiment would go like. So I have chosen 5 substances which will represent both natural and also the urban climbing surfaces. I've picked a bark, I've picked a glass, metal, painted concrete, and the unpainted concrete. So these are the 5 substances I took, and I created a racetrack. So you can actually see in this image, I've created a different racetracks for these geckos to run on it. So then what we did, then we understood majorly 4 parameters. This is what those parameters are. And also I made them run upwards, downwards, and also in a straight angled way, so that we'll understand that how these geckos can work in a both ways. This is mainly to understand how they find a refuge easily, if it is down or if it is more. So yeah, so these are the major 4 things what we have come out from this experiment. I calculated their total sprint speed, how fast they run this 1 meter racetrack what I have made. Whether urban gecko will run more or the rural gecko will run more. That was the simple objective we had. And which animal will take the peak speed more. which animal will start more, what is their highest instantaneous speed while running for this. That is one thing what we have calculated. And third one is their burst length, at what amount of length they will show their maximum speed. And also we understood in a different surfaces, as you see in the slide, how many times they stopped in between, how many times they slipped in between, and how many times they slide in between. Because not all the geckos have been uh, trained or been there on a glass surface, but I'm making them run on the glass surface. So this is where we try to understand how these animals are adapting to these different surfaces in the urban areas, right? So this is one fun experiment what I'm currently doing. And also my preliminary data says this: urban geckos have been showing the stronger grip in all the surfaces, and they have a better acceleration, and they also have a better burst capability, and also they could easily run on any smoother surfaces compared to the rural ones. This is one insight what we have found. But in the rural geckos, we have seen them they run overall 1 meter distance faster compared to the urban ones. This could be many reasons of that, because the amount of surfaces they have, the amount of free spaces they have in the rural compared to the urban. In the urban geckos, they have to find the refuge very quick if there is any danger is there. So that could be one of the reason. So this is what the pattern shows currently. And also in the grip and acceleration, the urban geckos have uh, beat the rural ones. This is one thing we see. And we have not found much slips and any kind of slides in these geckos, because since it's a 1 meter distance racetrack what we have made, so there's been very neglectable uh, the slip slides and the slopes what we have seen in this. So this is what currently the trend says. So in this, what we could understand is, obviously, the rural geckos have been not exposed to variety of microhabitats like the urban ones. So urban geckos might be adapting to these surfaces. That is one insight what we could actually think of in the morphological way. Probably how tomologically and the physiologically how they are adapting, that is what we need to know. But in a morphology way, this is what the current trend is looking in these two geckos what I'm currently working on. So yeah, this is what I had explained. Coming to the thermal biology experiment, I am currently looking into the three major aspects of it. One is their preferred temperature. For example, urban gecko, what temperature it prefers to live their best of the life, whether it's 35 degrees or 34 degrees or whatever it is. So this is what we call it as preferred temperature, at what temperature you are okay to survive. And then I'm looking something called as CT max and minimum. This is a very interesting experiment where we will check one particular gecko from urban at what maximum temperature it can survive. For example, can I give a 40-degree temperature surface? Can it survive? If yes, this is their maximum temperature with that could survive. If the Bangalore crosses 45 degrees, then this animal cannot survive in this particular temperature. Like that, we also looking the minimal temperature one. Imagine I put them in a 15-degree chamber. Is it surviving? If yes, that is what it is. If not, probably these animals are not going to adapt if the temperature drops below 15. This is one parameter we are currently looking. I think if you guys have any doubts or something, you can note it down. Obviously, you can ask me at the end. So yeah, and the third major one, what we're looking is that optimal temperature. This is another experiment what we're trying to do to understand at what temperature this gecko will perform their best. Imagine if I ask them to run for a 1 meter surface at a 35-degree temperature, how fast it will run. If I increase the temperature and I make them run, how fast it will run. At what temperature they perform their best. That's why we are also trying to look their optimal temperature, so that we are absolutely correlating with to the outside temperature what is currently they are facing. If yes, how they are surviving. If not, how. Excuse me. So yeah, this is how my preferred temperature experiment would look like. You can see here I have a thermal heat bulbs, which will generate a heat up to 100 degrees Celsius, from 60 to 100 degrees Celsius. Here you can see I pack ice chambers, which will have a temperature around 18 to 20 degrees Celsius. And in this 1 meter track, I leave the geckos in between and check which side do they prefer a lot. Do they walk towards the hotter region? Do they walk towards the lower region? Once we acclimatize, when we clearly perform their diet, when we clearly understand their uh, habitat, if they're well, then only we conduct these experiments. So this is how the experiments go. What preferred area are they choosing? So this is how the setup would look like, and this is how we are conducting the preferred temperature. And the maximum and the minimal temperature, as I mentioned, for the maximum temperature, we use this hot tub, what we have, and we gradually increase zero 0.5 degrees temperature in this hot tub to understand whether how sluggishly they react to it. You can see here there is a gecko here. So this is the very interesting physiology of this animal. Imagine I put the temperature around 38 degrees. If it feels that it cannot survive more than it, these geckos will actually flip and stay like this. They will try to do some action, and as soon as they cannot resist the temperature, they will flip. Once they flip, we understand, okay, this is the maximum temperature that this gecko would withstand. So that's how we note down the maximum temperature of the particular individual. And also same thing it does with the cooler side. So we pack ice packs around it so that the temperature has been reduced. So if it turns upside down, that's where we understand that, okay, this is the minimal temperature it would go. So yeah, this is how these experiments are currently running. And also the optimal temperature, as I mentioned, we set their body temperatures in a different way. Probably I start with 25 degrees, 30 degrees, 35, and a 40 degrees. At which temperature these geckos would run faster? That's the whole objective, to understand their optimal temperature. So this is how the experiment setup would look like for this. I would just tell you the general trend in how these animals are actually behaving with the preliminary data I have. So the Hemidactylus, the nocturnal gecko, have not shown much significant results in this thermal experiments, but we could see there is a variation of around 1 to 2 degrees Celsius, how the urbans have been coping up more. But in the Nemaspis mysuriensis, most of them are showing the difference between the 2 degrees, 1.5 to 2 degrees. So that's how we could think that at least some of the geckos have been able to succeed to withheld the higher temperatures. That is one trend what we have seen, as you mentioned. This is one of the plot of CT max and the CT min. We could see that the wide range of temperatures have been faced by the rural ones, but the urban ones are showing somewhat better than the rural ones. That's what the trend looks like. This is for the optimal temperature experiment, at what range they are performing their best. Till now, we could think that their optimal temperature would be somewhere around 27 degrees to 29 degrees. So that's where they are performing the best in this lab conditions. But obviously, we are conducting more number of samples to come up with a better results to understand this. So this is what the trends are currently looking like. And as I mentioned, we can also check the stress of this animal. This is one simple experiment I'm conducting where I take the RBC of these geckos, and I look what's the ratio of heterophils and lymphocytes. You know that heterophils and lymphocytes are two of the major type of the RBCs what we could find. By understanding H is to L ratio in a urban gecko and in a rural gecko, we could come to the understand that how stressed this particular animal is and how stressed this rural animal is. So this is one experiment we are trying to understand their whole physiological changes, how it has been happening. Okay, so these are the major things, and this is what I need to come up with the answer once all my experiments are done. Are they physically changing morphologically? If yes, how? Do they move differently in the different surfaces? I showed you the 5 different surfaces. Majorly, I picked it up from the urban areas. Do they actually move differently in these surfaces, whether it's urban or the rural one? And how hot is too hot? Can Bangalore go up to 40 degrees and can all these reptiles still survive over there? And how hot is too hot? What is the maximum that could have a thermal limit? This is one question what we are trying to look. And is city life internally taxing. That is true or not. That is also we need to understand whether it is a good place for animals to survive. So yes, so this is how the research is currently happening for us. But why do you think this matters? You all see the gecko in your house. You will all kill them sometime. Even I've did this before. We will all just ignore things. But why does it actually matter? It's not about the gecko research what I'm doing. It's not about the research somebody is doing with a snake or a reptile. It's not, and particularly this research is not like what you all have seen the major conservation research as everybody is doing, right? It's not like I'm saving some tiger in a big pristine Western Ghats habitat. This is not some what do you say? This is not something which I'm reviving back any of the pristine animals' habitat. I'm not working with something big animals like Great Indian Bustard. It's a small gecko, what you see. And first of all, this is the least concerned animal also. It's not something endemic or endangered or vulnerable, right? So it actually matters because we see how rapidly this urban is expanding. It's absolutely not about the geckos this whole research is about. It's about how these animals are adapting. Are we seeing microevolution in India also, like how we see in Puerto Rico lizard? Is it actually evolving so fast? If yes, how? If yes, is it only reptiles are evolving so fast, or is there any other animals are also evolving so fast? I don't know if you know how much time this Darwin finches took their beak to evolve, just because the habitat and the nut growing trees were present. It took a lot of years. It took million of years for any morphological adaptations to happen. But are we seeing evolution in a 10 to 15 years? That is what this whole project is about. And climate change, let's not talk about this now. It is something which everybody needs to bother about. The amount of rapid urbanization, the amount of pristine refuges what we are going to cut or we are cutting currently, will it, I don't know whether will it make us to survive in this country peacefully in this world. So this is what the bigger picture is about. And if yes, and obviously there is no going back from here. We are not going to reduce any number of the cities. It's going to expand more itself. I don't know if somebody is from Bangalore is listening this. Recently they announced 40-kilometer away area called as Biddi as the next AI city, which is absolutely 50 kilometers away from the core city. And we are expanding in a so way that, and how these future cities would look like, right? We are making a backup cities. We are making Delhi as a new Delhi. We are making Mumbai and a new Mumbai. Bangalore and the new Bangalore is already here. How we are going to make these future cities look like? Are we making all these animals and plants going to survive? That is what the bigger question is about. There are only two things I always tell if somebody asks what is this project is about. If any animal would survive, they will survive however it is. If not, absolutely the species is going to extend. From least concern to within a 2 years back, we are going to announce them as a vulnerable species, right? So there are only two things. If there are adapters, they will survive anywhere where we could see all these three things. If not, there is no way that they could survive. And it's also about every tree we remove. That means every refugee what we are removing from this small microhabitat animals. If you all have listened, I told you why I choose geckos and reptiles as a model organism, because they choose microhabitats to survive. They doesn't need a big home or a big nest to survive. Imagine if we remove one tree, we are we are taking out uh, many lizard or many grasshoppers or many insects home. And every lake we lose, every path green we replace, absolutely we need to think how it changes thousands of species and it changes millions of animals path. I mean, whenever until it comes to humans we will not take this seriously. That you also know, even I also know. But this is where we need to understand the amount of rapidness right now it's going. That is what bothers us, right? And yeah, I think I've used 10 times the refugee word in this talk. This is how refugees will help. Even though you have a thick, dense urban heat island city, they always look for a blue under green itself. If the blue and green is there between the 50% of the red, somehow the animals could easily survive. If we lose blue and the green in between the red, that's where the problem starts. So that's why the refuges are very important whenever we are building the cities, right? So yeah, whenever you see a gecko in your home sometime, whenever you see a gecko nearby when you're parking a path, just don't look that as one disgusting animal. Just think that as a natural thermometer, because that's what actually telling us from the research that how these geckos would give an insight about how these ectotherms are going to survive, right? So I have this one question, if you're all looking. If a tiny gecko must rapid evolve to survive in these concrete in our cities, shouldn't our cities also evolve with it? So why not only uh, animals should adapt to these cities? If we also build a cities so that it will make our job easy for these animals and also to have a better refugees, right? So that is where we need to understand how each microhabitat shows a much differences and how our future city needs to be designed properly. Obviously, this is a big question for all the future designers, future ecologists, and the botanists, those who are listening. We need to contribute something in this particularly design and the urban industry where our insights needs to be taken. For our insights needs to be vocal, we need some of this kind of research to have a backup for us, right? When we tell that blue and green is absolutely necessary for us, that's when somewhere we have a value by doing a lot of ecological research or whatever it is. I feel that the design of the future cities, whatever we are going to rapidly build in the next 5 to 6 years, we play a very important role in this. After I understood how geckos are actually suffering or working with it, right? So yeah, evolution is not happening somewhere in 50 years or 100 years or 1,000 years of time. It is happening right next to our wall, and it is happening so fast. That's what the previous research has been telling us, and probably that's what it is in a future way. So yeah, by this I would just stop by telling or bragging about my research from last 1 hour and how it is important. Thank you so much, all of you, for listening this. And yeah, I would also thank all the collaborators of mine and all the funding agencies. I would thank my supervisor from Jain University, where I'm currently working on, Dr. Krishnan from New York University. She is quietly helping me with the sprint performance experiments, giving us clear thought, and all the physiology experiments I've designed with the Professor Maria Tucker from Indian Institute of Science. I would thank her and all my CUBEC team. This is my research team called as CUBEC in Jain University, where we work upon urban ecology, biodiversity, and climate change. So we always pick questions which is related to this, and we work on this thanks to my whole research team. And yeah, I would also like to thank Biotics team. And yeah, thank you everybody. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, obviously I'm here to answer all of this. And this is a small QR I've made if you want to look upon my research and few other details. Thank you. I will stop my talking.
Thank you so much, sir. I would like the audience to either raise their hands, unmute their mic, or drop their questions in the chat box, if any. In the meantime, you can also scan the QR code on the screen to know more about Amith sir's research.
Are there any signs? Till now, I would say no, because it takes a lot of time to go until the microevolution level. But yeah, I think the current trends, and see, currently I'm working with just two species which are endemic to this particular area, right? So probably if we expand this research with different cities and the different habitats majorly, and look upon the more species, that's when we could actually confirm the trend whether the microevolution is there. But I would absolutely tell that we could easily see microevolution in any of the reptiles very soon in India. So, I mean, if you see the literature of how microevolution is happening, you would understand that we are also able to see this very soon. I would say not in this any of the gecko species currently I'm working on, but yeah, the trend is yes.
Thank you, sir. We have another question.
Yes, Gagan, thank you for the question. Why did I choose a gecko? So because most of people will hate gecko while looking at their uh, whatever the morphology it is. But the major question, why did I choose a gecko? Because they are everywhere. They belong to urban, they belong to rural. That made us easy to understand how easily we can pick a model system to work on it. And second thing is they are adapted to most of the surfaces. You'll see them in smooth, rough, wood, glass, everywhere. So that causes lot of ability to perform different experiments to understand or to prove whatever we are trying to do. So that is why I choose Gecko. And many of the people, I think till now in India, I didn't see any literature where they are explicitly working on the Gecko. So also to fill that research gap, geckos are one of the good model systems. There are many research about the big lizards, but yeah, the smaller ones, yes.
Thank you. We have a raised hand.
Yeah,
Hey,
I will
Hamid,
also. Yes, Georgie.
hello.
Yes, Georgie, you can speak. Can I
Yeah,
take
you talked
the
about that.
another question before?
Yeah, sure,
Go
sure.
on, go on, go on, George. Okay, I can see a Sangeeta's question. Were you able to sample the species at the intersection of the forest landscape, try to compare with urban geckos? So currently, I'm following this map. There's a Google Earth engine where we could actually see what's the temperature between the landscape. That is basically the LULC map, which will update every day. So I'm following this map to understand what is the core urban area, and I've defined urban area in a particular way that if the map shows that this where the temperature is increasing, that's where I'm currently sampling in the urban areas. And rural, I'm not taking the forest landscape, I'm considering the rural areas. So I've kept a distance of 60 kilometers from urban to choose any of the rural area in different directions. Once the 60-kilometer part is done, so whatever the rural area, the lesser population with the lesser landscape areas coming, that's where I'm taking these samples. I'm not looking any forest and any intersection. The intersection would be the peri-urban area. I've considered before, but then I realized that it's very difficult to mark a peri-urban in a Bangalore, so I've dropped that thing. If you need more details, it's a very good question what I've asked. I could share the map of my sample area in which and what places and why I have chosen. Thanks for the good question. Georgie, you can ask your question.
Yeah, in your experiment, you talked about H by L ratio, right?
H is to L ratio, yes.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes. I have talked about H is to L ratio
Yeah, so
to understand the
what is the
stress.
trend actually? Like, does it increase or does it decrease? How it is like in the
Okay, so yes, if you ask about my experiment and the my geckos trend of the H is to L ratio, till now I have found no trend. I just explained you just that how H is to L ratio can be used. But as soon as I increase the sample, I am expecting that urban will have a higher H is to L ratio because they are seeing chronic stress more compared to the rural ones. H is to L ratio will only applicable only if we see the chronic stress for a longer time. That's what I'm. That's what my hypothesis also says for this objective. But if you ask me the trend, till now, no trend. I hopefully there is no trend until I finish my experiments also. But that is what my hypothesis also says.
yeah, thank you.
Yes, Georgie.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? So I think that's about it, right? Okay. As we come to the end of today's session, we extend our sincere thanks to Amit sir for his enlightening talk on how humans impact the wildlife with key insights from geckos. So we were able to learn a lot from these very common creatures that we see around us every day. And it was really good, sir. Thank you so much. And we
Thank you
also
so
thank
much.
everyone who joined and actively participated. Your curiosity and engagement are what continue to drive Biorix forward as a meaningful and growing scientific community. So, I would also like to remind you all about Biorix Biotalks, which is a student knowledge sharing series, a wonderful platform for you to present everything biology related. Tomorrow we will have a biotalk session by Sandesh JS, MSc Ecology, Pondicherry University, on the topic Wildlife Corridors Reconnecting Fragmented Landscape for a Biodiverse Future. So, the link for tomorrow's session will be posted on WhatsApp groups that you are part of our community. And this is also remember that registrations for biotalks are still open. So if you are passionate about any topic in biology or life sciences, this is your opportunity to step up and lead a session with Biorix. Interested participants can register through the form shared in Biorix group or through the link in our Instagram bio. And with that, I think we can officially conclude today's session. Thank you all for participating in this discussion. See you in the next Biorix session.
Thank you, everybody. If you have any questions, you can post an email also. I would happy to answer. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening.